I looked at it and I went like, so what's with this black box thing going on in the audio business? Everything's a black box. And so I started with a grand piano.
Hi, this is Gautam Raja of Upscale Audio. Today we're going to do a field trip across town to Thousand Oaks, where we're going to meet Carolyn and George Counnas of Zesto Audio, and we're going to learn how these products are designed and manufactured. And we're also going to learn how fighter jets and grand pianos form a part of every Zesto Audio component. I'll see you in Thousand Oaks. Wow, we've actually covered so much already, right?
Yeah.
Before the cameras even started rolling.
Yeah, but that's okay. Yeah.
You know, there was almost like a moment where Zesto started, where you had gone to someone's house and looked at their phono stage. Can you just tell me about that?
Yeah, so I was an audio engineer and producer. I worked at recording studios and did live sound and, like Red Rocks, and and it got to a point where I couldn't go home and listen to music. Yeah, because if you do 15-hour session, you don't want to go home and listen to music. So I didn't put a lot of emphasis in reproduced music at home. So we moved here in 2000. And so I had the opportunity to work at a post-production house, did some engineering there because I'm familiar with video and audio. But then we got laid off right after 9/11. So, and then I went to somebody's house. They wanted me to help them set up a turntable. And I listened to their phono stage. And it was like, wait a minute, I think I can do better than that. And we got laid off. I needed to do something, and so we created Zesto. And Carolyn.
And then he said, "Oh, I could make a phono stage that sounds better than that." And I said, "Well, I can make one that looks better than that." So, my background is I am an artist. I've always been a fine artist. I did printmaking and oil painting, and worked in the commercial interiors business for probably 15 years. So I worked with lots of architects and designers, furniture designers, and it was really interesting to see the thought process on how important it is to have a premise of what you're designing. So I looked at it and I went like, so what's with this black box thing going on in the audio business? Everything's a black box. And so I started with a grand piano. I said, there's just this huge disconnect between how beautiful the music is and the aesthetics of this music. So we started with a grand piano, and I just wanted everything else to kind of flow. And what's kind of fun is I look at form follows function. So it's really important for me. I'll work 6 months on a design, but George, in the meantime, is working, designing all these printed circuit boards, designing everything and how it's going to work and with the real estate where everything fits. And then I'll work after that because the engineering is most important. But what was interesting was, fortunately, tubes can be noisy. A phono stage picks up, amplifies a lot of noise, so we had to get the power supply as far away from the tubes as we could. And the design is asymmetrical, and it just really, kind of nailed the whole, it made it quieter and more musical and aesthetically.
When you say grand piano, I'm looking, there's Zesto behind us now, and I'm seeing those curves both from the top and then also on the front. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Where did the name come from?
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I'm partially Greek and Armenian, and it's an offshoot of Greeks saying something's hot, zesti.
Okay.
Something's hot, so I just converted it to Zesto.
You used to work at Decca Radar Navigator.
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about that, but more what did you learn there that you're able to bring to Zesto today?
Sure. Well, I was an apprentice, which is a big deal, and I wish they were doing these programs all over. I worked several days a week at Decca, and then the rest of the time I was in college. So I would learn the theory and then actually, put it to use. But as an apprentice, you get to go to every different area. But the main ones were research and development, R&D, on airborne navigation systems before GPS.
Okay.
So, I had to sign the National Secrets Act. Of course, that's expired, so I could talk about it. But we used to design all sorts of things. Airborne navigation systems, they had to be reliable. They couldn't fail in a fighter aircraft. So what they had to do is predict how many hours they could run before failure. Mean time between failure, which is what they would call it, MTBF. And so we do the theory, every solder joint had a number, every capacitor, every resistor, and then you come up with a number. So one of my jobs was to prove it. Accelerated life tests. I would, because aircraft, fighter aircraft would sit on a tarmac in the desert and get to like 140 degrees internally, and they would scramble, and when they get up to, in like less than a minute, they would be up to altitude, it'll be minus 30 something degrees.
Yeah.
So the circuits had to survive that. The temperature change, you had humidity issue, vibration. We used to shake them. I mean, you
drop them.
So I would have to do accelerated life tests. Yeah, drop tests. So I know what the military spec is, and of course this stuff doesn't need to be to military spec. It would cost a lot more to make. But I know how to basics of like how to make something reliable.
So if you could tell us a little bit about what you like to hear from a system and what you're building into the sound of Zesto products.
Okay, so the thing, I come from a pro audio. So I'm used to being in a control room in the studio, listening to instruments. I'm used to standing next to a saxophone or a trumpet, listening to whatever it is, a Marshall stack or whatever. And then translating that into something that's recorded, that's reproduced. So a live sound is like an actual live instrument, a person standing in front of you playing, and the obvious one is a trumpet, because they're really loud. You have a trumpet player there, and you start having somebody play, could be quite startling as to how loud and how intense that is. Whereas when you reproduce it, you obviously can turn the volume down. You can't turn the volume down on an acoustic instrument. So I want to capture that immediate sound, that impact of that, the quickness of it, but be able to temper it a little bit so it doesn't just make me run out of the room. So live would be, an actual instrument, and lively is close to that, but it's still pleasant. It still has, you can listen to it, but it's not, tube electronics have been known to sound, a little slow and muddy, and but this is not. This is exactly the opposite, because actually tubes are faster than solid state.
Okay. Oh.
And in fact, I have to slow this down to make it sound right. Otherwise, because without getting into a whole bunch of stuff, but basically, in industrial electronics, that they figured out that there's a limit to how fast a silicon chip can go, and a germanium chip can go, and because tubes have a vacuum, you don't have anything to go through. So it can be very, very fast. So the potentials there, they've always been set up in a way that is, doesn't really display that. All our equipment has no negative feedback.
Okay.
So it's harder to do, because it could go into oscillation, it could do all sorts of problems, but but that gives you that immediacy.
Yeah.
The other exciting thing, to be fair, is so we learned tubes and then it went to solid state. This is a completely underdeveloped technology. That, like right now, we have a thing it's modern tube design for the 21st century listener, because there's so much exploration that we can still develop in a tube circuitry that's just left there on the table back in the 60s. So it's exciting.
So the other thing that's really interesting about Zesto, and you mentioned that people ask you about this a lot, is that you are a couple and that you run the company. And on this side of it, at least, it's just the two of you.
Yeah.
First, Carol, actually before that, can you tell me a little bit more about what you do apart from design, what you do with the company?
I'm very detail oriented. Like if I go to an audio show, I've got a 6-page Excel spreadsheet. So fortunately, my professional experience in the furniture industry was extremely detailed oriented. So now, we may have, 400 parts in a piece of gear, and I'll order all of those. And, we do the marketing, I give the dealers a hard time. What else? I don't know. It's a family business.
And in terms of the design, what's interesting is we're sitting in a room now surrounded by your art, and some of it's just so beautiful. There's a big, a huge outdoor. Can you tell me a little bit about your painting? Like, you seem to have at least from what I'm seeing here, there's a little bit of a theme going on.
Yeah. Well, I think I prefer landscape painting.
Mm-hmm.
So these are oil paintings, and this is about a mile from our house. It's a state park, Wildwood. But I grew up in Maryland, and everything's green, and you get out to California, and there's just like there's so much warm color, and that really inspired a lot of my painting.
And I think there's so many audiophiles who are also really interested in cars, including our very own Kevin Deal.
Oh yeah.
So we talked a little earlier about how you used to be in car racing. I think we'd have a lot of our customers who'd be really interested to hear about that. If you could tell us a bit about that.
Well, we did that for I think we were SCCA members for 25 years. I came in second at nationals.
Nice.
So there.
It'd be nice. Do you have photographs?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
I
we
did.
have something.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or much younger days.
Can you tell me about the things that stay in there? So I'm guessing preamp and the power amps, and I'm seeing both Zesto. So can you tell me about those in the reference system?
Yeah, this is our regular products. So it's the Eros 500 monoblocks. That's powering these Martin speakers, and then Cardis cables and a Lido Ultra 2 line stage, and that's been pretty consistent for a while. But and then phono stages, we have 3 or 4 different phono stages here.
Mm-hmm.
The Deluxe 2 is what's hooked up this moment actually, and then we have a reference, Tesla reference. We have a whole list of.
We have 4 phono stages.
Okay.
And then and now we're doing a digital system. We've got a DAC, the Athena DAC.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working on the tube output circuit for it, and we have other engineers that are working on the digital side of it.
Okay.
So and then it's a Dr. Fiker Blackbird with triplanar tone arms, and so yeah, and this is kind of a basic system. But at any one time, any one of these things was swapped out. So if we come up with a new line stage, well, that's going to go in place of this.
Mm-hmm.
Any new power amps, they go in the place of that. So that's kind of, that's the system of it. So, but we only do one thing at a time. So you change one thing,
yeah.
then you know what's going on. If
Yeah.
it's not changing everything at the same, who knows?
But I think it's really important. Audiophiles like to mix and match everything, but the value of having the synergy of a full system that's designed is magical. It really is. So.
Because it's all designed together.
Yeah, yeah.
So all the R&D is done here. Well, our R&D, the analog part of it. So we have, Carolyn and I both have offices here. And in my office, you'll see that the test equipment and the computers and the things that, the parts and the things that enable me to do the electrical part of it. And then Carolyn does the industrial design, and she's got mock-ups and all sorts of things that she does.
The factory is not very far away, correct? It's
Right.
And so really always excited to see factory. So can you tell me as we walk through, what are we going to see? I can see from here, so I know your designs are fantastic. I've heard Zesto. They all look good. But what else is going into a product inside that's making Zesto?
Well, I'm very proud of the way it's built. And I have to say, we have a great reputation. We don't get a lot of, product back on warranty. But what you're going to see is how they design a printed circuit board. Right now, we're working on the DAC, and there is an awful lot of parts that go into a DAC board. There's several chips, and then you've got engineers who have to program that. So we're really fortunate to be working with a team of world-class digital designers. The other thing is the quality of the build. For example, some of these parts you have to actually have a microscope and look through a lens to be able to see all the parts. Some of them have 100 connections on them. And so that all has to work. And then there's this quality, a lot of the digital has this what's called a pick and place. So these wonderful robots are doing the are placing. It's all programmed and placed. But then a lot of our analog is all done with what's called through-hole production, through-hole printed circuit boards. So it's soldered on both sides. It's not wave soldered. It is all through-hole. And then the other thing that's very high quality in audio is point-to-point wiring. So the cables are all made by hand. The way the connectors go from like your XLR out, your transformers, everything is hand wired and soldered. Then you have a mechanical, it's called. Then you got to be able to put everything together and how it fits, and then you have final testing. And that it takes a while to do all that, but I'm very proud of the quality, the build quality of Zesto.
Okay.
And he is too. No.
I am. I think that's really good. They had to do it better than me.
Yeah.
That's how we work together, because they actually build stuff, and I went, okay, yeah, they know what they're doing.
A lot of people ask us about working together, so just to be full disclosure, it's not for the faint of heart. However, we mentioned that we both got laid off after 9/11 from these jobs. And it was sort of like you had to reinvent yourself. But what I do want to say about audio, starting audio, is that literally it took us 40 years to become an overnight success. So we had started off, kind of with a bang. So it was good. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Agreed.
You can't make this stuff happen, I swear.